There's a new battle brewing in Australia for cheap EVs, and there's a lot of competition in that market. Currently, there's a GWM Aura and there's also the MG4. Both very good vehicles at very good prices, fully electric. But this one is another. It is also from China. It's called the BYD Dolphin. We've got the top spec model here. There's over 400 Ks of driving range. There's a lot of spec going on. So if you're in the market for a cheap EV or you're looking at the BYD Dolphin, this is a video you're going to want to watch. This might be the one video that you need actually, because I'm going to run you through all the details you need to know about this vehicle. Is it good? Is it nice to drive? What's the range like? What's the technology like? There's a lot to get through, so let's get stuck into it. The Dolphin is BYD's second model to arrive in Australia after the larger Atto 3 lobbed in late 2022. The Dolphin is a smaller, city-sized hatchback, which is only just Australia's cheapest entry into electric motoring. It's 4,290 mils long, 1,770 mils wide, and 1,570 mils tall. That means it's shorter and narrower than a Toyota Corolla and Hyundai i30 hatch, and for reference's sake, it's just a fraction taller. Another important size reference here would be the MG4 and GWM Aura electric vehicles. The Dolphin is slightly longer than both of these, but it's not as wide as either of them. The Aura is the tallest of the three, while the MG is the shortest. However, the main comparison would be on price. The entry-level BYD Dolphin Dynamic starts from $38,890 plus on-road costs, which undercuts the cheapest variant of the MG4 by only $100 and the Aura by just over $1,000. Our tester is the up-spec premium model, however, which costs $44,890 plus on-road costs. This upgrades the electric motor from 70 kilowatts and 180 newton meters up to 150 kilowatts and 310 newton meters. Charging speeds go from 60 to 80 kilowatts, and the battery size goes from 44.9 up to 60.48 kilowatt hours. This increases the claimed WLTP driving range from 340 to 427 kilometers, and the claimed 0 to 100 time drops down from 12.3 to 7.7 seconds. That means this Dolphin Premium goes up against a mid-spec GWM Aura extended range and the MG4 Excite 64. Standard kit here includes a rotating 12.8-inch infotainment display, 6-speaker sound system, panoramic glass roof, climate control, keyless entry with push-button start, and there's also heated electric front seats and heated rear outboard seats and 360-degree camera system. On the outside, this premium spec also gets 17-inch alloy wheels and a two-tone paint job, along with a more efficient heat pump and more sophisticated independent rear suspension under the skin. Here's the interior of the new Dolphin, and I've got to say it's quite an impressive setup, especially in comparison to what this car is competing with. Remember, this is a very cheap electric car in the scheme of things, but it doesn't feel cheap inside. You might know the Atto 3, the other BYD that's currently available. It's got quite a wild interior setup. This is maybe a bit less crazy, but it does have a few unique setups, I think. Firstly, materials. I want to talk about the contrast of materials we've got here. We haven't got all those crazy colors like the Atto 3, but we do have a nice mixture of hard plastics with different textures going on. This is a bit of a softer, almost suede-y kind of material here on this part of the dash. We've got some shiny black plastics and then some other textures up here as well. So it's got a nice finish to it, I think. It's not trying to have things like stitching and perforations and to look like a luxury car. It's not a luxury car, but it looks well done and well executed, I think. And no, it doesn't get those guitar strings on the doors for you to play Smoke on the Water, but otherwise this interior is impressive. Build quality seems pretty good as well. If you just grab bits of the dash and the center console here and shift it around, there's no squeaks or rattles. It does seem to be well made. And in terms of practicalities, this is good also. We've got a storage bin up the top here. That'll fit a smartphone pretty well. We've got a reasonably big phone there and it fits in no worries. But you can also fit your phone here in this nice slot. That's actually a wireless phone charger. I will note that with my phone, with a caveat that I have dropped it a fair few times. Didn't seem to charge for a long period. It seemed to come on and off quite a lot when I put my phone there. We tried it with another phone just recently and it seemed to work better. So maybe that's just my issue, but you'll fit a large phone in there. And that means that this is not a console in terms of storage. That is just a spot for your elbow. At least it is nicely padded though. But we do have some nice storage here underneath. It's a little bit awkward to get to maybe, but there is a nice big space in there just for putting lots of stuff. And I'd definitely prefer to have that than not have it. You could stick a handbag down in there, a box of tissues or something like that. It's quite a big, useful space. And you've also got, hiding in there, this thing. Looks like some of my mum's old lipstick or something like that, but it's not. It's actually a pretty handy little thing to have. On one side, that is an implement for cutting your seatbelt in case you are in an accident and you can't get your seatbelt undone. It's a sharp blade in there, you put it in and you rip it through. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to test that out. And I'm not going to test this out either, but that is for pushing up against a piece of glass and it's spring-loaded and it will shoot out a sharp little implement and that will break the glass. Once again, helping you to get out in the event of a crash. I actually haven't seen that in a new car before, so it's interesting and not a bad feature to have. I like the seats. They've got a bit of a sporty look to them. The materials are nice. We've got the basic sets of adjustment here. I'm going to be a little bit critical and say under thigh support could be better for someone like myself. My feet do sit a little bit further back here and my thighs come off the seat. You cannot adjust that either. Just the basic 6 ways of adjustment for the driver here, but you do have tilt and reach adjustment through the steering column. That all works well enough. Now, in terms of infotainment and that sort of thing, you would recognize this screen. It's a 12.8 inch infotainment display. That is the same as the Atto 3. And of course, it's got that cool party trick as well. Spins around between portrait and landscape modes. It's actually not too bad to use in this portrait mode when you've got maps running. There is native navigation in this infotainment display as well. But portrait doesn't work when you're using smartphone mirroring, which is what most people will probably do at the end of the day. So you might not use it that much, still a pretty cool trick to have. The other things you do have in this infotainment is things like climate controls and that sort of thing. You do need to go through here to get to it, heated seats, other vehicle controls. This does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of what you want out of the vehicle. So you will find yourself digging through here a little bit to find where things are. It does take a little bit of time to learn where things are. It will get better over time, but I would probably still prefer a bit more of a traditional old school climate control setup here in terms of fan speeds, temperatures and that sort of thing. But I guess this is a bit more of a minimalist setup overall. We've got a spinning volume thing here, which controls obviously the volume for the infotainment. And on the other side, that's actually your gear shifter, which is quite a novel, I think. I haven't seen something like that before. It works well. It's nice and clean and basic. Pull it down for drive, back for reverse, and then park is on the side there. It all works fine. There's some other buttons here for driving modes. There's also a button here for slippery conditions, adjusting your regenerative braking, and also your windscreen demister. So there's some functions there, just not the stuff that you might use every day. That is all hiding in here. Now, other things to talk about, there is some more storage actually. There's a lidded compartment in here. I've currently got my sunglasses in there, but you could throw a few wallets in there or something like that. It's quite big. And then your power outlets are hiding. It's actually kind of hard to see from the driver's seat, but they're under here. There's USB-C, USB-A, a 12 volt, and also a micro USB. That would be for your maps on the navigation system here. So overall, along with a small digital instrument cluster in front here, which is mounted on the steering column, which is kind of interesting, this interior, for the money, is quite good. Looking at this Dolphin, I bet the first thing you don't think of is family car, and well, it's not really a good contender for that, but second row space is actually not too bad. I'll open these door handles, they feel pretty nice. The door actually feels quite heavy. It's got a nice premium feel to it. It doesn't open super wide like some vehicles do, but the amount of second row space in terms of leg room and foot space is actually really good in this car. Being a dedicated electric vehicle, the floor is low and flat, and for the space of the car overall, this second row is actually quite generous. I'll get to the boot, which isn't as good in a minute, but if you want to throw kids into this thing, you can actually do it. There's 2 ISO fixed points for the outboard seats, and there are 3 top tether points. In terms of width, you're not going to be able to fit 3 baby seats in there. I reckon that's fairly strong, but in terms of fitting 2 kids in there or 2 adults, it's actually quite a comfortable spot. Let's jump in and have a closer look. All right, baby seat's out and I am into the second row. That's my driving position up front there. Like I've said before, I'm a little bit under 6 foot tall and legroom is surprisingly good in this Dolphin considering the size of the car overall. I've got a lot on offer there. The floor is nice and flat and low and there's lots of toe room going on. This is fairly comfortable, I have to say, although headroom isn't that good either. Once again, I'm a little bit under 6 foot tall. People who are taller than I might be rubbing their heads. There isn't a sunroof in this vehicle, more of a glass roof with a sunshade that can be retracted. So that element there does eat into a bit of your space there. Visibility isn't too bad overall. It's a little bit impacted by these big seats in front, but it's not too bad. And comfort is good. I think the space is the major strong point here. You don't get air vents, however. That is a negative if you're going to be having people in the second row all of the time. In terms of amenities, you do get one single cup holder there. There's a USB and USB-C power outlet, multiple map pockets, which is pretty handy for storing your stuff. And then there's some extra cup holders here as well. Pop that down, there is 2 in there. So this is pretty good. There's room for bottles in the doors as well. The doors look pretty smart, once again, similar to the design up front. This is pretty good. The air vents is a problem. I think visibility could be slightly better, but otherwise, for the size of the car overall, this is surprisingly spacious. So the second row is good, but that does come with a compromise with the boot. This isn't a big vehicle overall, so something's got to give, I suppose. And in this case, it is the boot space. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of length going on in there, and with this luggage blind in place, there's not a whole lot of height either in offer. But there is a little bit more to give here. Take this bad boy out, and the boot suddenly gets significantly larger, so you might even find yourself throwing that in the shed or something like that. And using the vehicle in this setup here. It's quite a large lip to get into, but we've got our charging cables stored in this bag here. That boot is a little bit more livable, I think. Maybe fitting a pram in, it's more of a stroller sort of setup here, I think, but groceries, a couple of larger bags, weekends away, that sort of thing, this would work well. And you notice that this boot just keeps on giving, actually. It's kind of like a babushka doll. Pull this next floor out, and you don't get any more space, unfortunately, but down here you will find in the bowels of the boot is a tyre repair kit, which is a goo kit, unfortunately. There's no full-size spare in this vehicle, along with a warning triangle and a couple of other bits and bobs there in case you do get a flat tyre. But if you are valuing boot space, this probably isn't the vehicle for you because clearly they've prioritised space in the front and second row instead of in the back. With an 80 kilowatt charging capacity and 60 kilowatt hour battery, the Dolphin can go from 10 to 80% as fast as 38 minutes. On a slower 11 kilowatt wall charger, which you might have in your garage at home, this would take a little bit over 4 hours. And with a consumption rate of 13.8 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks in our majority city driving, and we were driving for efficiency, it's worth noting, 400 kilometers between recharges would be easily achievable. However, more highway driving at 110 kilometers an hour, colder weather conditions, and less efficient driving characteristics would likely see the efficiency of this Dolphin decrease noticeably. Now, the first thing to note straight away is that this Dolphin we're in at the moment does have the more powerful motor and larger battery. The entry-level model drops down in both of those regards a little bit. But if you do want something that's a little bit perkier to drive, this would be the choice. That does come with a caveat, however. These tyres that are fitted to the Dolphin, they are a Linglong Comfort Master is the name of them, and they do have a fair amount of trouble dealing with the amount of torque that we've got on offer here. If you're a little bit too heavy with the accelerator pedal, the car can spin the fronts quite happily. It definitely doesn't torque steer. I think there isn't enough grip for that when the wheels start to spin. They just spin. And the traction control does a decent job of pulling things back a little bit, but it does lose composure fairly quickly. So keep that in mind when you're driving around. In terms of body control, handling, and that sort of thing, steering feel, this Dolphin doesn't feel too bad. It's definitely not a hot hatch, but in terms of lateral grip, as you start to load the car up through corners, it's not too bad. I think the MG4 would be the more rewarding vehicle to drive. Having that rear-wheel drive bias and a little bit more of a pointed steering feel is nicer than this Dolphin. But in saying that, I think this Dolphin is fine. It's perfectly good enough for the application. This is a hatchback. You might call it a small SUV maybe. I would personally call it a hatchback. It's a city car for cruising around the suburbs. It does the job quite well. In terms of ride comfort, this Dolphin is mostly pretty good as well. It absorbs most bumps at a lower speed quite well. Once you dial in a little bit more speed, maybe on a country road or something like that, and the bumps get a bit sharper, they do start to translate into the cabin a little bit. It's not too bad, and you do notice a fair amount of road noise coming from these tyres as well on some surfaces. Not all of them, but just that coarser stuff can allow the vehicle to hum quite a bit. Which is an interesting point in its own way, actually, because this Dolphin does a lot of humming on its own in terms of an augmented noise coming from a speaker. It's actually a little bit too loud in my opinion. It penetrates into the cabin at low speeds and it's kind of annoying. However, you can turn it off, and I suggest it because it's a much nicer driving experience. There are a couple of different modes you can choose. There's comfort and there's also dynamic. Both of them are quieter and it makes the driving experience much nicer overall. Now, once that noise is out of the way, there are a couple of other noises. It has a traffic sign recognition system, this Dolphin, which is actually quite quiet and not too bad. It's not as bad as others I've experienced recently, I'll definitely say that. But there is also a lane keep system, which can be a little bit aggressive and jerky in its operation. So you can dial it down a little bit through the settings in the infotainment display. It's worth keeping an eye on though. Another thing to note, I think a small thing would be the amount of rearward visibility. There isn't a whole lot going on, so you'll be using your side mirrors a little bit more than you would in other vehicles, I think, just to see what's going on around you. But I think all of these criticisms, they're mostly quite small because this car does overall feel actually quite well sorted, especially for the money. It's comparable, I think, to the MG4. It's also comparable to the GWM Aura in terms of being a car that doesn't feel like it's really built to a price. It actually feels quite well sorted in most of the way. And of course, it's got a decent sized battery with a good driving range. Now, we're currently driving through the city at the moment. This is where a car like this will likely spend most of its time, and it's where I've done most of my test driving as well, because I think it's important to get an accurate representation of the efficiency of the vehicle in this kind of scenario. And I can tell you right now that we've been using around 13.8 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks, which is quite a respectable figure, I think. This is a small car, don't forget, so it's going to be better in terms of efficiency in comparison to a big Audi e-tron or something like that. But 13 is quite a tidy number, I think, and it means that you will quite comfortably get over 400 kilometers out of this vehicle in between recharges, which, let's face it, is plenty enough for this kind of car. In terms of safety, the Dolphin picked up a 5-star ANCAP safety rating quite recently, and there is plenty of safety tech to back that up. That includes autonomous emergency braking, blind spot monitoring, tyre pressure monitoring, and rearward collision warning. There's also a traffic sign recognition system and lane keep assistance, but we found both of these to be slightly overbearing in daily usage. When I first drove the BYD Atto 3 a little while ago now, I came away surprisingly impressed by the car. So this time around, I'm still impressed, but not so surprised. And it's because BYD, you might not know the name, but they're actually a massive global player in the electric vehicle game. And you can tell when you spend time with this car that it's not just an upstart business having their first crack at building a vehicle. This does feel really well sorted in a few ways. The big strengths for me, absolutely, the interior and most of the technology. Some of it is a little bit hit and miss, but I like the build quality and just the sense of execution that this car has overall. There's a fair amount of battery on offer in terms of driving range. The driving experience isn't too bad. Those tires do let it down a little bit. And of course, the boot maybe is a little bit underdone in comparison to the rest of the vehicle. Now, the big question is, of course, is this better than an MG4? Is it better than a GWM Aura? I would definitely edge it ahead of the GWM. The MG4, that is an interesting one, I think, and it's going to take a real head-to-head comparison to nut it out because they're two different offerings and they're both extremely good. I think the MG will be the driver's car, but this does have advantages of its own. So this is very good. I like it a lot. Which is better? I'm going to hedge my bets for now. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Would you prefer this BYD Dolphin or would you prefer the MG4? And if this video has been any help to you whatsoever, let us know in the comments and give us a thumbs up while you're there. Now, if you want to watch the MG4 review that Wardy has done, it's a great review. Watch that one here. And if you want to see the other BYD, that's the Atto 3, a little bit bigger than this one. That's over here.